Welcome to Hawksong Weaving. I'm a disabled weaver who works exclusively with thrifted and secondhand yarn, and today I'll be weaving a self-striping scarf and being utterly baffled at the magma my partner can eat. I hope you enjoy. Life takes odd turns, but even tattered and worn yarn still has value. Tired joints and health flares don't have to stop the journey. Welcome to Hawksong Weaving, where all our paths are a little bit warped. I started out this project like I do all of my weaving projects. I use an adaptive warping method that I figured out over time. I have a genetic collagen disorder called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. For me, this means that I deal with chronic fatigue and pain in my joints, and that if I'm not careful, my joints can slip out of place too easily. I found that most traditional warping pegboards were too heavy on my arms and my wallet, so instead I use a small accordion coat rack. I keep it pinned with the warping peg and the loom, and from experience I know what pegs to warp to get the length I want for a specific project. This is what works for me. It won't work for everyone, and that's okay. Weaving has a long history, and while it's important to honor that when you can, it's also just as important to not be in pain while you craft. You matter too. As I'm warping this, I'm looking forward to the stripes that will form in this scarf. I love working with this type of yarn. It turns out different each time, and I find that it's fun to jump from one color to the next. With the warp threads sorted, I'm lifting up the loom to release the warping board from the loom, gathering the warp threads into one large bundle and using the back of my neck to drape them over and keep them tidy and out of the way, while I collapse the warping board and get it tucked out of the way until I'm at a full pause point where I can get it unclamped from my desk and then put away. I use terry cloth towels to cushion the warp threads. This helps prevent the finished weaving from being tighter at the ends and looser in the middle, creating a sort of sausage profile in the weaving. Like everything that I do, this is what works for me. If it's not going to work for you, that's fine. Keep on rolling. The way that I warp has me cutting the warp loops at the end of winding the warp. This is what's easiest on my body. Again, it won't work for everyone, but that's okay. This isn't a great angle, but I'm being careful to pay attention to how the warp threads are laying on the back bar of the loom, and the right hand thread goes through the smaller hole in the rigid metal reed. It's not critical, and some minor mistakes aren't the end of the world, but it does make it easier to keep the tension on the warp threads across the entire weaving. Before I get too far into this, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you'd like to support my work, some free ways to do that are to like, subscribe or follow, and share. This applies to other small artists as well. It's a great way to let the social media algorithms know that this is content worth watching. If you'd like to support me financially, per viewer request, there's a Buy Me a Coffee linked below, along with the link to the Hawksong Weaving Square site where you can purchase unique woven products. I also now have a Patreon that's also linked below. There are currently 4 actual tiers and 1 very silly tier. These tiers include early access to videos, a weekly post of Life of the HR and OSHA Cats, a Kvetchy diary, being able to vote on projects, first dibs group for projects featured in videos, and fun snail mail. The actual tiers range from $2, $5, $10 to $15. The 5th tier is absolutely a joke, but just in case, in this economy I won't say no. For $1,000 a month, you can tell me that I'm not actually disabled, I'm just lazy, and to try whatever yoga, juice cleanse, snake oil nonsense fixed your cousin. I'm absolutely open to other ideas for Patreon, please feel free to comment them. A quick sip of some tea, and attaching the warp to the bottom apron bar is pretty easy. I finger comb through it, get it separated into bits about 4 to 5 warp threads wide, separate these bits into 2, and then do a half hitch tie to the apron bar. I tighten this as needed to make sure that I have the right tension over time. This is where the self-striping aspect of this particular yarn starts to shine. It doesn't show up as much in the warp, but dang does it make weaving fun in the weft. I love watching the stripes of the weft build up along the warp as the scarf takes form. This is one of the best parts of weaving with thrift store yarn. I get to have fun, experiment, and watch things like this happen. I took a weaving break and went to be baffled at my partner's ramen. I have mast cell activation syndrome, which makes me allergic to a lot of things, often at random. I've got it mostly under control with antihistamines, and with that I've had an increase of spice tolerance, but I'll never be at the same level of spice enjoyment of my partner. Next time she makes her chili, I'll get some footage. On my personal TikTok channel, there are several people who know her as the magma entity. If I tried this, I'd probably end up in the ER. For those interested, this was about 1 cup of chopped kimchi, 3/4 hot dogs, 2 heaping spoonfuls of dopanjang, sorry for my pronunciation, 2 heaping spoonfuls of Korean chili flakes, 2 slices of American cheese. This was then cooked through with the soup base and noodles from a Shin ramen packet, and finished with some light soy sauce and sesame oil. Now tying off the scarf fringes, I prefer to do 2x2 tied into a fringe of 4, but if I'm short on warp threads, I'll do a double sliding knot of 3. I steam block my wool scarves. This helps the wool fibers to soften into each other and relax into the weave. Without blocking, you can get wrinkles because the weave tends to be stiff without the added heat and water. Sort of how your back gets when you've been sitting in a not great position for too long, and a boiling hot shower takes care of the knots. I love that my partner supports me in what I do, and with that support comes petting the newly blocked scarves. Penelope also had a staring match with the squirrels after my steam blocking. We joked that the bird seed I buy is the Cartoon Network subscription for the cats. They love watching them, I love watching them, it's a win-win. I completely spaced on hitting record, so I don't have the footage of cutting the fringe, but the usual footage for that is to eyeball the length of the fringe that I want, and use the "don't ask me how much I spent on these good shears" and trim it. The final step is between half an hour to 45 minutes of tying the fringe knots. A brief peek as Penelope Calico wondered what the heck I was doing, and here's the finished scarf. Thank you for coming along as I wove a scarf out of self-striping yarn. I'm so glad for the odd turn that your path took that brought you here. Thank you for spending time with me at Hawksong Weaving, where we're all a bit warped. And I hope that you have a truly excellent week.